Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Devs in the Shed. For anybody that's been here before, you know that both Matt and I, I'm solution architect, Matt's a principal TAM at AWS, and we deliver this show from our sheds. But Matt, interestingly, you're in the dark today. What's up with that?
I've got this nice little cloud light in the background. I know it's pretty corny, but I know you've got one arriving too as well. But it was kind of cool, right? So it's kind of like an orangey yellow kind of hue cloud. So yeah, I couldn't show it off with the light on, but in the interests of having a bit more light in the show, I'll turn it all back on. But yeah, so one of the things actually is I'm temporarily in my shed. We've been live streaming for a couple of weeks, and I've been in the house in evenings. So you might have seen us do some impromptu streaming. We're working on a couple of like game projects, like for this Pi game summer jam that's happening. So a lot of that's been done in the house. But I've got the shed here, and I got good news about my upgraded super shed that's arriving in a couple of weeks. So I'm actually going to be moving in the next 4 weeks across to a cabin. So I'll have to bring in the cloud light. I might bring in some other nice little lights and give it a bit of like a thematic view, but it's an entirely wood shed or a wood cabin. So I don't know, like actually I'll show you how much of a mess it is in the cabin, right? In the shed at the moment. So it's a very small garden shed, and it is just full of stuff at the moment. So I kind of hide it for the recording, but it's a little bit cramped. So I'm pretty excited to be going to a bigger space, but yeah, I'll have to use some of these cool lights that I've got as I build that space out, and I might give you guys a tour on the show too.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing your new little cabin. I know you've been excited and talking about it, and I've been thinking about how I might have to do some upgrades to the paneling on my wall to sort of like keep competing with you. But the tin shed works just fine for now.
Yeah, the tin shed's fine. I just need a double-sized tin shed with the amount of stuff that I've got for the garden. We've got a pretty big backyard here, and so you've got lawnmowers. Half my house is cat stuff. Like we've got 3 cats, and they just go crazy. And then all their supplies are all in the shed, so like we don't have to go and food shop for the cats every week like we do for ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to just maybe apologize early in case there is some background noise, because it's actually really windy here. So Matt and I are in Melbourne in Australia, and it's very windy at the moment. So there could be some background noise if that happens. We were sort of thinking that it might end up being devs in the storm today, but we'll see how we go.
Yeah, we actually had trees blow down in my area as well. So I had a call with a couple of solution architects at AWS this morning. And they're without power, right? So it's been massively windy. It's kind of an understatement. I think my fence is blown off a little bit, like it's kind of like on a lean, and it's been pouring down. For some reason, every Wednesday it's usually raining. So you guys are lucky you get the sound of rain in the background during our winter.
So yeah. So to kick off this week, and obviously, like we're going to dive into Step Functions Workflow Studio, and Matt's going to take us through that. We thought we'd kick off by looking at a couple of blog posts and a couple of releases that came out in the last week or so. So I'll talk through a couple that I thought were interesting and were worth mentioning, specifically in the stream today. So the very first one, this is a blog post written by James Beswick. And James Beswick is a solution architect at AWS. He specializes in like anything serverless, really, I would say. So he's built a number of different workshops and labs and posts, consistently on the AWS blog. And they're really in depth and really detailed as he moves through. If you do follow like the AWS Compute blog and look through those service updates, you'll have seen recently he went ahead and has built this Alicat racing application that was over a series of different posts. Interestingly, Alicat reminded me of a really, really old PC game called I think it was called Alicat, but it's a different racing application game that he's gone ahead and built. But this specific blog post is talking about single table design within Amazon DynamoDB. And I think this is the quality of this post, is deep and talks about how we go ahead and think about how we redesign our applications to use like a single table design when we are going ahead and like looking to model specific data, how we consider like our local secondary indexes, global secondary indexes, how we divide and partition our data as we're going ahead and implementing that. And I thought this was really interesting because I know that through my time dealing and interacting with like developers and solution architects, the question comes up all the time, and customers ask this question all the time around, when and where should I use like DynamoDB or NoSQL databases versus relational databases? And often a lot of the time people come and they say, when you have data that's highly relational, it makes sense to put that in a relational database. And I would probably sort of like maybe some, like as you start to get to explore DynamoDB and how you should start modeling and looking at modeling your data, you start to like see that myth can be like debunked reasonably easily. And you find that if you're modeling and building applications correctly, you can go ahead and have like proper relational data structures within DynamoDB. It just depends on how you go ahead and model that. Often with the case with a DynamoDB schema and setup and design, it's really important to have clarity on how the data is going to look in the future, because there is complexity and difficulty with restructuring that specific structure in DynamoDB at a later point in time. And some of this might be easier to do with a traditional relational database. But there are mechanisms to go ahead and offload that or move that into a secondary table. And we do see some of our customers say, look, the schema hasn't worked at the moment. We're going to have to migrate that into a new schema, and there are mechanisms to go ahead and help you do that. So I'm not sure whether Matt posted that link in, but that's a really good one if you're... Yeah, thanks, Matt. Yeah. That's a really good post to work through and look through if you're thinking about, Amazon DynamoDB, looking at that for a new application and thinking about how to modernize your own skill set around implementing single table design with DynamoDB. I know I've had a good friend of mine recently that invested a significant amount of time and is really happy with the output and outcomes that he's been able to put together by using this.
Yeah, I know a lot of people really like the relations, the relational model. Why can't I talk today? So the databases that are built on like relational structures. There we go. Like I'll just use that. They're pretty great, but during my time in AWS, I've really liked some of the benefits that Dynamo's given, and that's kind of why I like this blog in particular as well, of single table designs. So one of the apps that I'd been working on a couple of months ago was around having a whole bunch of different products, and I hadn't really thought when I did the table design that I'd be doing different product types. So like I had this app where I had this T-shirt. You'd have the gender of the T-shirt. You'd have the sizings of the T-shirt, and I'd kind of map that all out into a relational database. But I ended up moving it across to Dynamo because I realized I needed the flexibility. Like we started having like hoodies which had different sizes, and so I could kind of load that into a single cell. All the requirements around that hoodie size and then process. And then we started looking at like breakfasts and a whole bunch of other things that were completely random and unconnected, right? Like your breakfast order was like, are you vegan, or do you eat meat? And so Dynamo gave me that flexibility to just basically have like the data wrapped in JSON in one of the cells, and then I could kind of process that with my app based on the requirements. So I really like the flexibility that NoSQL gives you, even for like relational data models when they need to change over time. So that's probably just a quick call out there. I haven't read the article yet, but I've bookmarked this as well because I want to read through it and have a look later.
Yep. There's also a couple of, there's many YouTube series around this, but there's a couple of introduction sessions on Fuba. I'll post those into the chat once Matt kicks off, that are good if you're looking to get started, and how Marcia goes ahead and starts to think about modeling data and putting that into DynamoDB. The next thing that I thought was interesting to bring up, and I'm not deep on this subject, but introducing Route 53 Application Recovery Controller. And I guess what this specific release is doing is, and I guess if we look at something like this as an overview here, this piece of this diagram, like this is effectively leveraging Route 53 as that centralized ingress point. So being able to securely not just balance, but be able to route traffic between specific regions if you've got a global service. So I thought that this was an interesting application that goes through, and we look at how this, like the author of this blog post, Sebastian, talks about having a global application that has like global state persisted with Amazon global DynamoDB global tables, but is showing how like you can have a standby region available. So this goes above and beyond building high availability across specific availability zones, but has like actually like replicating some of those environments across different regions and being able to use Route 53 to determine whether one of those regions has gone down for whatever reason, and be able to like reroute that traffic to a secondary region. So I thought that was an interesting call out too, and I think Matt will post that link in there as well. That was worth reading. The last one that I'm going to cover off today was around simplifying CI/CD configurations. So there was a news announcement, an announcement on the 22nd of July, but actually I think there's more value on the 21st of July in Benjamin Smith's post, where it talks about AWS SAM pipelines. So AWS SAM is a serverless application model. So it's a tool or an abstraction on top of like CloudFormation or CDK that enables you to really easily get up and running with serverless applications, specifically around Lambda, DynamoDB, building and implementing queues. It does provide the full flexibility to extend into other services via CloudFormation itself, but for quick starts, for getting started, for demos, and even for like production-based applications, SAM is like really one of the tools that is a go-to for me. But the introduction here is that we've got AWS SAM pipelines. So there's some additions, and if you are familiar with the SAM CLI, so it's a SAM CLI that you go ahead and you use commands such as SAM init, SAM deploy. But now we have an extra feature called SAM pipeline in it, and this will take you through some bootstrapping and setting up of specific pipeline integrations that you might want to go ahead and set up. And if we look just quickly here, we can see that they've implemented some default templates around Jenkins, GitLab, CI/CD, and GitHub Actions. And so I think that this is really valuable when we're thinking about how we're going to head and automating and building our applications and pushing them into production, because SAM is really great and SAM deploy works really great, but I don't want to be deploying into production in a repeated process for my local machine. I want to incorporate that into a specific pipeline. And providing the flexibility to use some of the tools that you may already be using within your organization, such as Jenkins or GitLab or GitHub Actions, can be really beneficial. I know that internally, one of my colleagues and I have been putting together a proof of concept for another customer around using SAM to deploy my applications with code build and code pipeline, so the AWS CI/CD product suite. But it's good to see that the SAM, it's the SAM engine itself is now supporting some of those more outside of the AWS ecosystem platforms for CI/CD. So I thought that post was worth a mention today.
One of the things that I wanted to explore with SAM as well was, like, I know SAM and CDK are tying together, and I think we've talked about it a little bit on previous episodes, but that's something that I think we should definitely explore in a future episode. There seems to be a ton happening in the SAM space. And maybe if anyone wants that as a particular talk in the future, call out in the chat. We've got a number of subjects, but this could be quite a fun one to build something in SAM. But let us know what you'd like to see. Yeah.
I was assisting the She Builds program yesterday, and there were a number of people that were looking to begin their journey into deploying applications to AWS. And they were asking about, like, which way should I go? How should I go about thinking about this? And a lot of the time I say, like, here's some really good quick starts with SAM. And even if you're doing something simple using like, the Node.js, the Express framework to go ahead and deploy your application, for beginners, sometimes this can be really beneficial to say, I'll take my existing application that is in effect a monolith, but I'll go ahead and deploy that in a serverless manner. So SAM can really help when you're at that stage, but it also like highly supports and recommends that you break down your services into smaller pieces and support that microservices ecosystem. But it is more than possible to deploy existing applications using SAM and take advantage of the serverless ecosystem that AWS provides.
One of the other things I really like about SAM in particular is the fact that it supports DynamoDB and API Gateway and all those kinds of assets out of the box. So, like, if I was to pick something to build a serverless application, SAM's probably what I'd lean towards to get moving fast.
Yep. And so really those were my updates for this week. I'll hand over to Matt. He can talk through his.
Yeah, so let me get my screen sharing happening for everyone. You can see I just posted the link to Sam and CDK together. But the two that I did want to share, and good call out from GetDev. Sam can remove red lights. So the two things that I wanted to share, if we've got Aaron on the chat, I'll call out Aaron. I know he watches the show sometimes, but you might have remembered him from Amazon Location Services overview a couple of weeks ago. So Location Service is expanding. We now have support for Aurora and for Redshift, and so these are essentially allowing you to use the location service data within your database. Your databases. For some reason, I'm struggling to talk today. I think I'm just too hyped up on too many late nights, maybe. But we've been working really late on like the game competition. We've got a number of like really late events. You'll find out actually in 2 minutes. We might have a quick stop. Might mention like what's happening tonight as well in case anyone wants to join. But on the database side, you can actually like pull out things from Amazon locations, so like geo coordinates, geocodes. You can also it's two-way. You can share geolocations that you might have saved to the database with Amazon location as well. But these are effectively like really nice patterns that have been blocked, and I'll share them back into the chat, in which you can communicate with location and Aurora, or location and effectively Redshift as well, and do some pretty cool things with. So step-by-step guides. I'll have to look at them sometime when I get a free minute, but that's quite cool. Now, maybe let's flick back to you very, very quickly, Paul. Let's just have a look at what's happening tonight, and we'll end on it again for people that come into the stream late. But I think it's kind of...
Yeah.
Do you want to bring up the meetup? Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, so when we had Jason Umika on a couple of weeks ago, and we went through that lab where he deployed some tasks running on ECS Anywhere, and we used Docker and Docker to go ahead and do that. There was a number of people that have reached out post that specific event, and were asking about that, how that works. And Matt and myself and another associate architect, Ishan at AWS, we've put together a little lab. And Brian, who hosts this Canberra AWS Amazon Web Services user group, has asked us to come along and present tonight. So in 7 hours from now, Matt and I will be running a hands-on lab where everybody will be able to come in, and all you need is an active AWS account. If you've got Docker installed locally, that'll be helpful, but we still go through and we use Cloud9 to go ahead and deploy a Docker and Docker ECS Anywhere. We deploy a task, we look at how we can mount specific volumes, so we take it just that little bit further, and we see how you can go ahead and implement ECS Anywhere and how that might look in your specific environment. So this is just the event today. Sorry, there was a lot of wind in the background. And the event is actually it's a pretty short lab. So end to end, we're expected that with the introductions around this, we start at around about 7 o'clock. That's Australian Eastern Standard Time. And we finish at 8 o'clock. So it's only an hour session all the way through. And, if anybody's interested, please go ahead and register that event and join us tonight as we take everybody through that lab.
An agent with ANR, so has asked what's ECS. So it's Elastic Container Services. So it's similar to Kubernetes, but it's a little less overhead in terms of setup and day-to-day management. So ECS is kind of like Amazon's version of container services or Kubernetes. I'm a big fan because, being a TAM, I know that if my customers select ECS, there's going to be less maintenance that they need to do on their side. They're going to spend less time troubleshooting issues that they might have within containers, or doing upgrades and the likes than when they use EKS. But of course, Kubernetes is fantastic as well. So I've got many customers that use EKS too. But probably the key difference to me is just that it's a lot easier to manage and maintain. I've had a lot of customers that have tried to do EKS for 18 months, for example, trying to get it up and running, let alone like having it run day to day. Yeah, I don't know if you want to list any differences there, Paul, but might help people understand like where it fits in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I think that's a really good summary of how like where it fits into that ecosystem. I think that many of the customers, as they start to transition their journey and maturity around containers, tend to find ECS somewhere within their ecosystem, and so it is still a really predominant platform in AWS. I really like running that environment, and it is a lot less like overhead than running a full Kubernetes cluster. So I think it's really valuable.
And there's a lot of abstraction services as well. I was just going to say Fargate uses ECS. You can get it working with EKS as well. But Copilot and App Runner, some of the newer services, they all use ECS under the hood.
Yeah. So I mean, effectively, it's if you're leveraging ECS with Fargate, you have a serverless environment, so you are not running any specific nodes or instances that are running your container environment on. So leveraging a mechanism or a control plane like ECS to be able to determine which tasks you're going to push out, what they look like, and being able to push that into an environment that you don't have to go ahead and maintain and patch is something that's really useful. I will just add one thing, that the event tonight is virtual. So this is a virtual event. So we would encourage anybody from all around the world to go ahead and join that event tonight. And I've posted that link into the Meetup link into the chat here.
Perfect. So I might get my screen back on, Paul. Let's flick over. So today we wanted to explore something that I haven't touched in a while as well. So similar to last week, haven't spent too much time recently with step functions, but I wanted to have a look at the new Workflow Studio. It kind of got me a bit excited about, like maybe being able to build out visualization of what I want to do in step functions a bit faster. So today we'll have a look at that in particular, but I wanted to give a recap in terms of what step functions is to everyone in the audience. So step functions has like many different use cases, I'd have to say. So it's a very vague and open system that you can use, but effectively you'd think of it as like a state machine. And so step functions is like a series of steps that you'll be able to run to perform a particular task or group of tasks, and you might have like logic checks within that series of steps. So some people use it to break up their microservices. So they might have some business flows that they want, business processes. They might interact with step functions with an API to bring in a new feature into their monolith as they try and start to separate things out. And that might do something such as, like payroll processing for their monolith. Like they might have a series of steps to do payroll processing, and there's usually like 20 or 30 steps in that process and checks and balances that need to be worked out to work out the differing roles, the different salary types, the different packages that come with salaries. And so like in terms of step functions, you could use it in that case there. So it kind of helps you abstract away like that business logic into something that's discrete and it's serverless at the end of the day. Other people use it to simply have different workflows for their environments. So they might build a SageMaker model, then they might need to do training on that SageMaker model. Then they want to open that SageMaker model up for an audience that can then call that and take benefit of the machine learning that's being done there. And you might have like a series of gates that go through, like to train the model, and whether this is someone that's talking externally with the model, or this is like an internal developer that's trying to, manipulate the training and get that better. So it's like a really super wide thing that you can use in terms of working. But the main thing to think about is, I have this business problem. I know that I've got a whole bunch of like business logic that I need to think through on what to do. I know that there's going to be many different requests all coming in at once, or I know that there's going to be a constant stream of these requests for me to handle business logic. And that's kind of where I'd lean on step functions. Did you have anything to add to that, Paul, in particular?
Yeah, I think when we think about serverless applications and we think about an application, and let's just consider running something in Lambda. If you've got an application that has a number of specific steps that need to be executed or orchestrated in a sequence, if you were to call a Lambda function and the Lambda function was to then go ahead and call 6 different steps and hold that Lambda function open for that point in time, you'd be paying for the Lambda function processing time for the whole time that all those steps are executed. Whereas when we think about what a step function is, it would be invoke the Lambda function. The Lambda function does the first piece of information and kicks it off to a step function. And the step function is a state machine that defines what are the next steps that are going to occur in this environment. And they might be something like kick off into 2 different Lambda functions and APIs, or start up a different process, or pull some files in and generate a PDF. And all of these wait times, you don't have to pay for the compute time for when something's happening in a wait. And secondly, when we think about a step function, because we're thinking of something that might happen potentially at a much later time in the future, and you may need to poll for that. But you could think of something that says, my state machine in its most simplest fashion might be go ahead and register a user, and then 30 days later, go ahead and send off a specific follow-up question. And based on the response from that, go ahead and process something else. So step functions have a long lifespan as well. So it's something that might last a really, really long time that you don't necessarily want to use like control jobs to pick that up, off the back of like some sort of environment that was looking at a database table saying, run this thing once a month and go ahead and find all the people that do that. We have a state machine that is controlling the execution flow of that application over a longer time period. Yeah, I think the maximum duration 1 year.
Yeah, this is what I was going to show, right? Like this is kind of like the 2 different flows that you can pick for step functions, right? So you might have a standard workflow. This is going to be the cheaper option for everyone. It has a maximum duration of like a year to perform that task. You can execute like, over 2,000 calls per second. You've got a state transition of 4,000 per second. So it's pretty heavy on the real-time aspects already. And then, like when you go to express workflows, the duration's only going to be 5 minutes, but the execution rate is kind of crazy. Like you might have 100,000 things happening, being executed all at once, and the state transition rate's unlimited. So this is important to know because I don't believe, I'm sure of it. You can't change between standard and express once you've set up your particular step function. So if you've got real-time tasks that's going to be like massively at scale, always choose the express option. If you've got a workflow that you're going to get a couple of thousand requests per second at a maximum, you're going to transition the state like 4,000 times up to per second, always go with the standard workflow. So so most people will be creating standard workflows in the system.
There's just a question here from Argent with an R.
Yep.
What's the primary difference between step functions and using FIFO queues with SQS? I think like I can probably answer that, and then I'll hand back to you, Matt. But
yeah.
Like SQS is a queue. It is simply saying like put something on a queue, and something will later pick up that item and go ahead and process it. Whereas a step function is a set of specific tasks or events that need to occur on a specific workflow. So if we were to think about the earlier example when I said, if you had an application that took some payments and then sent you an email saying we've confirmed, but also sent you a PDF version of the ticket, putting the ticket generation into a queue would be something that would be worked with and specifically around like an SQS queue. Whereas a step function would be saying something like, if as part of that ticket purchase, we also needed to go ahead and do a background check on you, we needed you to have a step later that says upload your license, and we'll go ahead and verify that license. And post that step, then you need to go ahead and pay an additional $5 or something. And then post that step, then we're going to go ahead and send you the ticket. That's where you would think about like some sort of workflow that says the end result is an accumulation of a subset of tasks. So I hope that kind of answers that question. GecDev put up a good comment as well.
Yeah.
So basically using step functions allows sequential lambdas, but also because it allows you to arbitrarily wait an amount of time between executions. So you can send an email 6 months of time, an example. So that exactly reflects what I said earlier. You can have something that happens in a period of time in the future for something to come back and kick off again, but also allows you to run all these specific tasks, subsequent tasks one after another, and in parallel, as Matt will describe today as well.
Yeah, I was trying to find something in the documentation, but I didn't have luck finding a picture that kind of well represents it. I'm actually thinking that this one's probably the best one to show, right? But, you know, like for me, SQS is kind of like, you know, you've got this thing in the queue to be picked up and processed, like Paul mentioned. Like the benefit of step functions really is the fact that, like, you know, something's happened, something's coming in as event. Now you're going to call a Lambda to check something in the background. And then once that's done, you're going to call this Lambda to evaluate the data that came back and do something else with it. Then you might have someone have to go and tick a box, you know, to approve a transaction maybe. So you can kind of have human intervention. And then you've got like this decision tree where it's like, you know, you've got like business logic to work out whether, and this might be through Lambda again, like whether you're actually going to buy stock or sell the stock in this example. And then, you know, like you're going to report in like a, you know, a reporting engine or a reporting system or whatever, like what the end outcome is. So like this is like a series of steps, but it's also got like parallelism as in terms of like you can branch off, you can have if else logic, you can have multiple things fire asynchronously, or like a series of steps that are like synchronous. So you can have like a ton of things just completely built out based on you know, like step functions being called. In SQS, it's simply I've got the message there, and then, you know, this service is going to take that message, then it's going to do something with it. It could very well talk to a whole bunch of other systems and follow a flow like this, but this is really easy to build and map out visually, and you don't have to build like this, you know, this microservice to handle all the business logic. You can just basically build it all out through Lambdas and serverless very easily, so you can deliver to a business a lot faster. So with that being said, I think we've covered a little bit about step functions. There was one thing that I did want to call out as well. This was a little bit before we started the show, so we hadn't actually talked about it, but Event Bridge now works with step functions as well. And so that kind of allows you to get to, you know, you can call Event Bridge as like an event bus, and so you can have thousands of things happen at once. So that was a really, really cool feature from a couple of months ago as well, which got me interested in checking it out. I'll put a link to that in the chat too. But what I wanted to do today in particular was talk about like the Workflow Studio. So this is just this is an element of step functions. So it's a low-code visual tool for building state machines. You know, like if we think about how you'd build out a step function beforehand, you'd build everything out with this JSON-like format. So it would be using the Amazon state language. You would be building things out using this JSON type structure, and you might go like, I've got this first state, it's going to do this thing, and then there's going to be a choice, and then I'm going to do this, and I've got this thing to do. And so you'd build all of that out in this JSON format, and you'd call the ARNs for the resources that you want to talk to. You can feed in like some state and detail for them to enact on information. But that's essentially how you'd build step functions beforehand. So, you know, like if we think about like, if we think about like the amount of effort it takes for us to learn new things, right? Like it probably isn't too hard for us to learn Amazon state language. Like, you know, we could probably sit there and learn in half a day, and then we could be productive with it and build a number of step functions. But a lot of people want to build something very, very quickly, and they want to build it visually. They want to see the flows mapped out. They want to know that it's all going to work end to end. And I think that's really where step function comes in, right? Like it's a drag and drop interface. And you can say the same thing that you described through the Amazon state language, which is actually produced in the background anyway. You go, I want to do this action. I want to call this Lambda. I want to make this choice on what to do next. I want to add some information to Dynamo, whatever it is. And then you'd go through the series of steps that you want, and you just build it out really nice quickly. So if I look at like, you know, the example that I've got here with the stock trading state machine, you can see this is like a real example of what all the logic looks like. So you've got the buy and sell step, as I mentioned beforehand. You've got a choice. You've got these data types that you're feeding in for it to make the decisions. You're calling the ARNs of where you're sharing the data with for the next resource to kick in and do whatever it needs to do. And you know, it's 66 lines of this JSON, which is pretty short, but it's a lot nicer to just have an interface like this. So yeah, I wanted to have a play around with it. So what we can do is in step functions as a service, you create each of your state machines. So if I wanted to create a brand new one, I could. I can choose the code workflow like I've got with the other ones. So I could create it all in that JSON if I was familiar with it. I can choose that type at the very start, and it does give you options you can read through like what's supported in each before you make that choice, but most people will be choosing standard. You've got your sample projects as well that you can run through. But you've got this new option that's appeared in the console here, and you can see it's in Sydney too. So it's already in Sydney region for us Australians, which is great. But you can choose to design visually. So if I chose that option, you'd be brought to this studio in particular. And so you can see you've got your building blocks on the left-hand side. And then those are your actions on what AWS services you want to talk to. And then you've got this flow, like what do you want to do next? So there we go, it was a bit slow. So I could add some choice into the mix. I could do things in parallel. So let's go, I'd want to invoke a Lambda, let's say. I can then simply choose a Lambda function that I might have already built in the background. So I've got these 7 Lambda functions in my account. So one could be just like check the stock price, right? So this Lambda is going to be check stock price. That's great. Now what I want to do is once the stock price is checked, I might want to work out whether I want to buy or sell. So in that case, I would want to add choice similar to that other flow that I had beforehand. And I'll just call this buy, sell, right? And I'm probably actually thinking about it, I probably need like a second Lambda to work out what my choice is, right? So I'd kind of drag in between these services. So I could drop the decisions here, but if I wanted to build on top of what I've already got, I could just drag a second Lambda in. And then I could say, I want to know my buy or sell recommendation first. So there it goes. So for the buy sell recommendation, do I buy or sell? And then I've got my state tree here. Now, what I could do in this instance is I might call another Lambda that I might have for selling if I wanted to. So I could select, let's see if I've got one here. Yeah, buy stock Lambda. So I'm going to buy based on that business logic beforehand. So buy. And then I've got a sell one here as well. And so I can make that choice at this stage. But some of the other things that I can do is if I need to wait for a particular point in time, so I want to make a decision, even though it doesn't make much sense. Let's say I want to wait before I buy, right? So I think I want to buy, but I want to wait. I could almost, if I wanted to, just do a second check to make sure that the stock price is stable before I make that commit to buy. So I could go like, like recheck, call the same Lambda again, recheck the stock price, and then just make sure that I'm still in line for a buy sell. So I could go in here, could get the recommendation. And then, like based on that choice again, really, should I? Maybe I need this for Bitcoin. Who knows, even though I don't have any Bitcoin anymore. But then I could have, the buy kick in as my logic here. So really, should I buy? Like let's map that out to like the buy logic in here. But let's say if I wanted to sell, I could then create a second Lambda in again and put it alongside. Let me see if I can get the dragging item. I might have to move the view a little bit. So that state, I should be able to check. Yeah, come on. So maybe what I need to do is maybe I should add a new rule choice. Yeah, here we go. So I could add a second choice in, and that will give me the slot to then add my sell. And then the journey is kind of completed at that point. So I could go sell.
Matt, if on the left side of your screen you click the X, you'll get a bit more screen real estate.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So if I go cell, so def cell, so I can complete this journey, right? But I can put breakpoints in if I want to. So like if it comes up and says I shouldn't, I could have like a fail state that I could catch and log somewhere. I could give it an error name if I wanted to. At the end, I could have a success state for the buy if I wanted to. I can have that wait and time that I showed beforehand. I could break it out to make like multiple choices. So like I could say, yeah, really should I? Okay, I'm going to buy. But I might have 15 things that I want to buy, right? So I could have buy in here again and another buy. And so I could just I could keep dragging these things in to do a series of actions if I want to buy multiple stocks at once, let's say. So it allows you to build out this really, like what started as simple logic, like let's buy or sell shares, into like almost like a business flow chart, right? But behind that is code that will be able to execute that journey end to end. So it's really visual. It's quite a cool system. And if I actually go into like, what I might do is I'll can this. I'll actually go back into my API gateway example that I've got here. But if I edit this, so you can see this was all like constructed with that kind of Amazon state language. So all this was crafted in that JSON type format language. I can actually, for my existing step functions, I did realize I could actually bring those into Workflow Studio as well. So basically it's created a visual chart. Now, this isn't perfect. I've realized, just to call out in the chat, I've realized that a couple of examples of things that you might make in step functions, like some of the variables aren't mapping correctly. So I think there's still a little bit of work to do. But some of the services that you've got in step functions, you can bring into Workflow Studio and you can alter visually. So that's kind of cool if you want to move to this approach with existing stuff that you've got. But I could put like a delay in my notify success state for this particular step flow function. So I've just dragged that component in there. And if I applied and exited and I scroll down, I can see in the visual chart, it's now there. But if I scroll down, I can actually see that it's added that into that JSON for me, right? So I could, in effect, export this now, and I could create the step functions programmatically in my code later on if I want to replicate this in another environment. So that's a really cool fact. So if I saved this and then I executed this, you can see everything that's green succeeded, and you can see it's now waiting on my wait that I just created. So that's in progress, just waiting for the wait to complete. And then it's going to send an SNS off, I think, to say that the notification was successful. So I've simply altered that existing step functions state machine and brought it into Workflow Studio, which is quite nice.
That's probably a point there, Matt, that for any of our audience that is unfamiliar or hasn't used step functions before, that you get to see the overall picture through the Workflow Studio. You get to see the lighter touch graph that you've seen when you just click. But you also, so that the graph inspector, but you can see in real time as it traverses through the state machine. And this could be, you could have something that executes almost as fast as Matt is doing there, but you could have something that has a number of different tasks. And like, let's just consider a state machine that says, every time I get an image in, kick something off that determines, do I now have 100,000 images or a batch of 100,000 images? If yes, go ahead and perform a batch operation to resize them to the correct dimensions. Once that task has been finished, kick off an ECS task that goes ahead and run my machine learning model over the top of that, and you would see that state transition, and that state transition could end up taking a month or days or hours. So like you can actually have a visual representation of the progress of that state machine's execution lifecycle.
Yeah, and it could be like something arrives in the S3 bucket, like you mentioned. You resize the image, you tag the image, you put it into another bucket. You can do a series of steps, and you can see the outcome of each, right? So the input is nothing to start in the check stock. The output is, the Lambda has given us a stock price of 68. Then basically it goes for a recommendation system. So this is another Lambda, and it recommends the cell. And then it goes like, is the cell too big? Is it too little? So none of the data changes, but it works out whether it needs human intervention or not. Like it needs someone to send an email back saying yes. So you could use SNS or something like that to send an email to someone in finance to say, you got to approve this before we can complete this workflow. So you can have that human intervention step, which is really, really cool. And then you could have buy or sell, the decisioning made, and then it feeds through and actually performs that trade. I know that a lot of people want to use this for CI/CD pipelines as well. So this is another example where I've seen some customers, they want to have some governance around CI/CD, like a developer has submitted a change but wants to launch a service that might not be approved. You could be really restrictive on that service. You could say, I don't want people to generate this particular resource and manage it from the organization's view. Or what you could have here is you could have manager approval. It's like, okay, so Paul, you're allowed to set up that very expensive RDS cluster running multi-AZ. And so the manager can just email back and say, yeah, approved. And then the CI/CD pipeline kicks into life again and then creates those assets for Paul. So yeah, it's a pretty cool system. I was even thinking that maybe at some point we could probably make the rock, paper, scissors game using it as well. You could use step functions to work out what the computer chooses as an option and then do a compare. So there's an endless stream. When I said it's there's so many things that you can do with step functions. It's really just look at things that you've got business logic for that you might need to build an app around. A microservice around it. It could be just performing AWS tasks. And you've got a lot of things that need to kick off at once or be done in a particular order. Or it could be you've got a lot of processing business logic for a new part of your app that you've got. Maybe rather than baking that into your monolith that you're creating or your microservice that you're creating, maybe step functions is an easy way to do that. And people can see visually whether it's succeeding or not. It's serverless, so it's cheaper to run as well because you'll be effectively just calling Lambdas underneath the hood if you built that out there. But there's so many different things you can do with it, which is pretty cool. So I know, Paul, you've asked in the chat, is anyone using step functions within their organizations?
I've used
or their personal projects, yeah.
Not specifically step functions, but a really good use case for this with a prior employer was building effectively building state machines for insurance, submitting an insurance claim. So there's we're not just, step functions are not just for something that we're talking about technically, but these are business, real world use cases that you're going through that require a number of different collection points. And if you were to think about maybe an insurance claim, at the start you log into your insurance portal and you log a claim, and that kicks off a step function. And the next step is, do we have all the information gathered for this? The next step is notify the assessor to go out on site. Then the next step is, we wait for the assessor to log his information and some images. If it was the car accident, for example.
You could even have a step to pass it to SageMaker to do machine learning on the images, right? To recognize the damage. Yeah. And
so there's the automated steps that might happen computationally automated, but there are those other steps that will occur by some sort of user interaction. So the system sends a notification to somebody internal to go ahead and do some processing and to allocate the correct queue type or something internally. And then it is sent back to the customer, and the customer then has to go ahead and update the certificate of registration for the vehicle, as a proof of identity or something like that. So all these things can be mapped out as a step machine, as a step function, effectively as a state machine managing that, rather than having all of this sort of state machine logic built into your application code. So application code is doing that one specific thing, and doing that really well on a small scale, but you're having the state machine that is the orchestrator between all these different functions that produce the output at the end.
Yeah. So I would be interested if anyone gets back to Paul in the chat. But I'm hoping that you can see a couple of use cases within your organizations or your personal projects where you could use this. This could be quite handy for. One thing that I do really want to call out as well, because I think Workflow Studio was just a quick, it was just a quick, really cool feature that we've released to visually build things out. So there's not too much depth in there to go through at the moment. But one thing that I do really want to know is like what you guys will be interested in for us on the show, right? On our YouTube, so, YouTube Devs in the Shed channel, we're streaming the Py game contest at the moment, so you can see how we're building object-oriented Python Py game code, and Aaron is supporting us there as well. But we've got a lot of work that we've been doing around ECS and App Runner lately. But do you guys want to see us build an app for some of these weeks? I think we've got Redshift next week, right? And every couple of weeks there's a really cool service that we'll want to do on the stream. But I'm thinking, do we have an ongoing project, or are you guys interested in a particular service that's been around for a while that you want us, that you want to see us use or share some advice on? Me and Paul are always happy to learn and explore things ourselves. There's over 200 services in AWS now, so we're not experts in everything, but we like to spend a week, study up on it, learn a little bit about it. Sometimes we even come in cold and we go like, let's just see what we can learn today. People can bear with the struggles and all of that. Lumberyard, that's too easy. That's an easy one. We could actually do Lumberyard. That's just the Crytek engine that I think we repurposed and we brought the license for. So I'm actually already quite familiar with that. So we could do something with Lumberyard, but we're really interested in working out what's going to help everyone here be successful. What you guys want to learn, even on the Amplify Flutter side. Like I saw, like in the I might bring it up actually. The JetBrains report, I saw that Flutter is actually moving up the charts as well, and we've got some cool stuff with Flutter. We've got some Flutter experts in Australia too. Developer survey, let's find it fast. Are we in 2021? I think we are. I think that's right. Yeah, here we go. So, like I had a look through the survey and I saw that like we had a couple of languages up on the rise, and I was like, well, Rust is just doing awesomely. I know we've got some people in the audience that love Rust, TypeScript, JavaScript, Python, all things that we love. They're all up to the very top, and you've got Java there. I know Paul does some Java work. I'm too scared of it since touching Android back in Gingerbread days. But Swift is up there for building apps. But I've noticed that Dart and Flutter for building apps is kind of peaked as well. So we could do a cool project with like AppSync and Cognito, build an app in Dart as well. But yeah, we're always interested in getting feedback from everyone on where we take this.
Matt, when we were in Step Functions Workflow Studio, there was a number of different services that you are able to hook into, and you scrolled up and down really fast. It might be worth going through a number of those different services and talk to all of those, because we specifically, or you specifically, spoke about Lambda, but there's so much more that you can reach into in the AWS ecosystem.
Yeah, that's true. So we can go through the options, right? But you've got you can talk to ECS, EKS, SNS, SQS, AWS Batch. You've got Athena in there. You've got I think you've got QuickSight. You've got the CI/CD tools, Dynamo, SageMaker. There is a ton. It just Lambda was really easy to show. So you can always invoke a Lambda and get the data back. You can always publish something to an SNS topic. You can run a task. You can stop a task in ECS. You can start execution with step functions on a particular other journey. So that might be like chaining step functions together. You've got support for glue, so you can start glue jobs and pass it data. Event Bridge, if you want to feed an event into Event Bridge and have Event Bridge kick off, that's really powerful. AWS Batch, as Paul mentioned, for submitting images or submitting a ton of things that need to be processed in a set order, you can use Batch to do that, complete that task quickly. And I think that's cool because I think image resizing could be quite heavy. But if I remember correctly, Batch basically mocked up is it using containers or is it using Lambda on the hood? I can't remember, Paul. But you could use Spot, I thought. Maybe I'm thinking of another service.
Yeah, so batch would be more for long running tasks. So it's on the back end. It's not typically using Lambda.
Yeah, it's using containers, right? So yeah, I'm pretty. Yeah, I always get confused between batch and what's the other one. I've forgotten already. But you can also call like API gateway, make a request to API gateway. Then you've got all the Athena stuff like getting results, starting queries, all the code
Athena
build
is
stuff.
the Athena interaction is really important, or to think about why and where you use Athena. So, Athena is that service that enables you to effectively query data that's like JSON, CSV, or Parquet format that resides in Amazon S3 that you've crawled and built a schema across. But so you're treating like this raw data as a database, but because that data might be really large, and specifically Athena itself is looking through raw data, this isn't an actual database, so it's serverless in itself. It can be slow. Now that's an acceptable trade-off because you are paying like a very low cost point, and you're paying for the time it takes to execute that query. But if you again were to go ahead and execute that query that might need to perform some like aggregation across a number of different data sets within S3, if you were to invoke that using, let's just say, like a Lambda function, it could take a long time. So you're paying for the compute time that's happening. If you're going ahead and executing that like on an ECS task, then you're taking up the time for that task to be running. And if you're running in a Fargate environment, you want that task to be spun up to go ahead and do that execution and then turn itself down. If you were to run that task on like an ECS instance, and you had a multitude of like applications on that ECS instance, you would be taking CPU or resource of that container. So it's a really good use case to see where a step function can go ahead and set off this execution and allow that to happen, knowing that it's going to take a long time. But really interesting there's also like the direct integration with DynamoDB. So you can go ahead and do like put updates and deletes and get directly onto DynamoDB as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. And code build as well. Like when I talked about beforehand, like you might want to start a particular build for iOS apps separately to Android apps, right? So you might do the Android app builds on like Graviton instances, but then you might want to use Mac EC2 to start a build for an iOS application that's come in. So you've got your code build options there. You've got a ton for EKS, so creating, deleting nodes and clusters. You can run jobs. You can call EKS. So you've got like a ton of stuff in that regard. EMR, so you can create EMR clusters as well. Start jobs in particular if you want to on the EMR or EKS. So that's quite handy to have. And then you've got like a ton of the SageMaker options as well. So you can create an endpoint for people to access. You could create a new model. You could tune or create hyperparameters for your machine learning models. You can update SageMaker endpoints. You've got all those options there to kind of like connect into SageMaker. And then you've got SQS where you can send a message into SQS to then be kicked off. Or you've got step functions where you can run other activities as well. So there's a ton here. I'm pretty sure when I did a comparison before, I'm pretty sure this is pretty much everything. So everything's available in Workflow Studio that you might hook up to step functions already. So it's all available here, which is nice to see. But I know we've only got 2 minutes left. I think the last thing, Paul, is maybe just one more call out to the event tonight. So yeah, sure. Let's bring that URL up again. Let me know when I can add your...
Yeah, you can add it.
Here it is. Yep. So
before we go ahead and close off on this, I will say that there's a really good video on YouTube from reInvent 2020 around getting started with AWS step functions. So this is a video pre the workflow announcement, but I'll paste that into the chat as well. But I'll paste that. So anybody that's interested in looking at what step functions are, go ahead and watch that video. But to go back to what we're talking about the event tonight, so if anybody wants to go ahead and register for that, so that's the Canberra Amazon Web Services AWS user group. Canberra is the capital city of Australia. But again, it's a virtual event. So, you know, if anybody who wants to come along, please feel free to come along to that event tonight. And you'll see us, and you'll be able to like participate in a hands-on lab that is completely deployable and runnable within your AWS environment. We use Cloud9, and if you want to, you can go ahead and run that on your local machine as well. So the lab fully supports that as well.
Yeah, and the last thing before we absolutely shut down, I'm just going to grab a link as well. Let me get to our channel on YouTube, right? So feel free to, I'll just do this with my account on Twitch. Feel free to come and join our YouTube channel. So the reason why I say that is, you know, we stream once a week, Wednesdays, 12 p.m. lunchtime, Australia time, AEST time. We stream this show once a week. But on the YouTube, what we do is we upload little snippet videos like throughout the week. So if we go, hey, this was really cool, we just played with this, we created this, it only took us 10 minutes, we pop that onto the YouTube. And so if you want to have more videos like this and smaller snippets, come subscribe to the YouTube as well. We are broadcasting on Twitch and YouTube too. But this will be really good if you want like little snippets throughout the week. As I mentioned, we're working on a Pygame map at the moment, so that's kind of a bit of fun. That'll end at the end of this week, and then I'm sure that we'll be on to you know, other projects in the following weeks, yet to be decided. I know me and Paul have a container thing that we want to build, but there's also like a number of other things, and I think someone called out green grass. Yeah, we've got to do green grass. So you know, some of the smaller projects we might do there. We've also got a computer that we need to build from scratch, don't we, Paul? So we'll probably have a couple of long streams, like when we actually get time to go out camping into a cabin in the woods with okay internet to stream. Like, we're going to build a 8-bit computer from scratch as well. So we've got a couple of long-term projects that we do want to like stream, that we don't want to take up other people's time on the AWS channel. But that's pretty much it from us, I think.
Yeah.
Anything else, Paul, or should we say goodbye?
No, I think that's it for the week. Please feel free to go ahead and comment on that YouTube channel. We read all the comments and we'll reply to you. If you've got suggestions or ideas, go ahead and do that. Our contact details are available. So like, you know, Matt Coles and Paul Kukula on LinkedIn. Reach out to us if you've got questions, and we're happy to answer them. We're happy to specifically put on, you know, Twitch streams or streams around your questions. We're here to help the community.
Perfect. With that being said, I'll catch everyone next week. See you later. Bye.
Take care. Bye.